Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. My name is DB333, and welcome back to Hearts of Iron 4 TNO as Ostafrika. Now, in the last video, we started doing some investigating. We're reinforcing some Anglos, and doing some light purges and some light expansion of indentured servitude. I think that's a nice monetization friendly way to put it, so we'll go with that. But yeah, we got Takagi's been elected. Chile's on fire. Interesting. Are we gonna be able to see anything as a result? I don't think we will. We've seen a lot of provinces here, though, which, from my understanding, there's supposed to be a big-ass civil war when Chile gets content, or potential civil war, so that'll be fun to see. And also, there's just no culture name here. Game, you want to figure that out? Anyway. Agents classified have returned from their Operation Windhoek, and results are promising. A successful infiltration of the Oberkommando der Südwestafrikan Wehrmacht has allowed access to some detailed after-action reports. Agent Redacted reports that there is one event in particular that is extremely interesting for reports. Recently, a supply facility near the city of Mbanza, Congo, was attacked by terrorists believed to be the Angolan separatist force UNITA. A small garrison was reported to have been overwhelmed by a surprise attack from a numerous enemy. They were supposedly forced to retreat to a more defensible position, allowing the natives to escape with a massive load of supplies, chiefly medical equipment. But our operatives reports many things about the story do not add up. The small army garrison reported only a brief firefight before retreating with no casualties. No rebels were reported killed or wounded. Most suspiciously, a flight of tactical bombers were taking off from the nearby Malanye airfield, bound to attack targets in the Sahara. They could have easily been contacted to help, but they were not. From what we know, the story could have been concocted by native sympathizers of the Sudan African armed forces to explain the handoff of supplies to the enemy. Needless to say, this is a serious crime, and the consequences are dire. Strafgesetzbuch, Section 202, providing aid and comfort to the enemy. If the Reichskommissar Schenk is found to have covered this up or facilitated it, the axe could fall on his neck as well. For the glory of the fatherland, we will reveal what is behind the curtain of lies. I also want to do a follow-up on that, so let's investigate and see if there's anything that comes up. But yeah, it looks like, I never figured out how to pronounce this, but Hitnagud Nagdut movement is doing pretty okay in, I was about to say, they were doing okay in Madagascar, but wait for it. Yep, okay, they have won. Interesting. Just in case this ends up happening soon, which I totally have no reason to suspect, we're gonna go ahead and get the, everything ready. Sipping out his wine, James Coverdale savored its bold, earthly flavor. Finally being given an excuse to uncork his last remaining pre-war French vintage. The occasion he'd been waiting for quite some time, as his family had afforded the honor of hosting Clifford Du Pont, the newly appointed Colonial Valta, the colonial administrator who was able to puzzle out using his shaky skills of German for Zambia and Zimbabwe on his trip down to Salisbury. Realizing he'd missed his guest's comment, he spotted, yes, quite. James, his wife Marjorie, and DuPont were seated at their opulent mahogany dining table in a pool of soft yellow light, enjoying a dinner of roast beef and gravy. Godfrey had been sent to bed early, complaining uproariously as usual. The slaves stood by to refill glasses DuPont held forth. Well, I suppose I had a except, eh? Old Hans is quite the typical Hun, and I dare say that without my voice in his ear, or his translator's ear, things would be a deal more hairier for us Brits down here. That was not British. I don't know what that was, but that was like 50s radio host. Du Pont finished his wine and held it behind him, where it dutifully refilled. Wondering if there was some better way to broach the subject, James asked, Cliff, well, I wouldn't quite mean. Did you see any indication that the Reichskommissar was building up the military? At seeing Du Pont darken and put down his glass, he quickly added, it's just that a lot of us out here are worried about the instability that may ensue were there to be a conflict, more so than usual. Du Pont sighed deeply and frowned up at James. I won't lie to you, there's a good chance it could get hot, especially out here. I'm doing all I can to talk him down, but Hans doesn't much like listening to anyone who isn't agreeing to him. Following that, the rest of the evening was decidedly subdued, and all retired early. When dawn came, James stood with Godfrey on the plantation veranda, watching as the slaves got out of work in the endless fields of swaying hemp, as Du Pont's driver took him away down the driveway in a cloud of red dust. Putting a hand on his son's shoulders, they looked out together into an uncertain future. We couldn't understand because we were too far, and couldn't remember because we were traveling in the night of first stages. Well, there's that. Let's go ahead and expand. Or let's do the boogeyman. Du Pont has approached us with an interesting proposal. He's just finding a common threat that goes beyond the vague slave revolt. For this, he's identified a group of former South Afrikaner politicians and officers who still plot with the OFN to stabilize the Reichskommissariat. In order to further unite our races and help relieve some pressure from our home front, we shall divulge these confidential informants that these men have contacts with the CIA and plan a full-scale uprising, while the slaves will receive further support and supplies, and begin a second revolt as soon as our troops have been sent to deal with the first. This should help unite the population against both natives and reformers. Well, now there is Eretz Ashkenaz. Agents Redacted have returned from their Operation Windhoek and results are promising. Disguised as a janitor, Agent Redacted infiltrated the headquarters of the Sud-West African Luftwaffe and retrieved several objects of high intelligence value. One of these items was a complete accounting of the Sud-West African Luftwaffe's operation for the past 3 months. We have pored over it and have identified an area of concern related to target selection. In accordance with Führer Befehle number 45, the Sud-West Afrikaner Luftwaffe has been directed to attack targets in the Sahara, specifically the former French colonies, prevent the reorganization of the so-called Free French. This requires the complete annihilation of any facilities or infrastructure located in the area. On first glance of this target report, they seem to be doing just that, logging many airstrikes over the area. But a closer inspection raises questions about the airstrike. Most of them are in the northern desert, sparsely inhabited by anyone and hardly home to any insurgent activity. A smaller number of raids take place in the plains and grasslands to the south, where more natives can be found. Only a few missions take place in the southern jungles, hitting uninhabited places like Bordeaux. And no raids at all take place upon the coastlines, believed to be the main hiding place of the Free French remnants. It is unknown why this is so. The coasts have a larger degree of anti-aircraft protection, true, but they have far more inviting targets. This can only be cowardice or weakness, both of which are unbecoming of the Reichskommissar. For the glory of the fatherland, we will cleanse the Reich of any remaining elements of the old order. So we got... I'm not quite sure what these buttons do, but we got, yeah. They're evidence of Luftwaffe pilots avoiding Free French cities on purpose. Stability's kind of war support is blah. But hopefully we'll, that'll be kicked up soon enough. How are things going for old man Hitler? Tiny on her knees. It looks like they are going for whatchamacallit, the loyalist enemies everywhere. Hooty could feel their knives hovering behind his back, ready to strike. He could sense the traitors hiding around the corners, ready to open the gates to the degenerates and the barbarians. They would destroy everything he had worked so hard to build. It could not be allowed to happen. Taking a deep breath, Hootik walked with his usual serenity to Bayer to finish scribbling. Chmielewski and the others were quietly chatting among themselves about a strike that had hit one of the new supply depots on the border the day before. Apparently, after slaughtering the garrison like savages, the rebel group had done it. That had done it just left their dead to molder in the dirt. They were certainly making the list. "It is complete, Reshkommissar," said Bayer, jolting Hootik from his reverie. Wordlessly, Hootik snatched the list from Bayer's pudgy hand and glanced over it, scowling at the names of the groups and individuals who threatened his rule. The list was to be made public, a propaganda piece to show Ostafrikaners the men who threatened their homes and families, those treasonous barbarous scum who would have stand opposed to the erring future. Of course, we'd have to remove a few names from the list, the ones we sent to the Boer allies. It wouldn't do for them to learn how many of them would someday face the pointed end of a bullet. "Very well, Bayer. I approve. Danke, gentlemen. You are dismissed." As his underlings filed out of the room, Hootik rose and made his way to the balcony. It was a cool, refreshing evening, the sun just sitting below the horizon. Hootik poured himself a glass of cognac as he looked out to the hazy, distant skyline of Colonial, smog covering the city like a shroud. Hootik looked down to the tenebrous verdure of his gardens, orderly, pristine, pure. Slaves shambling through the gloom, maintaining the immaculation of his design. Everything and everyone in their proper place. Inhaling the crisp air of dusk, Hootik awaited the dying of a light. We live as we dream. Alone. So got some new fighters, I believe. Let's get some drop tanks to make them a little bit better, and then yeah, let's do some Army Reserve training. And then from here, we have the Preichlatt-Schleicher initiative. In our efforts to modernize Ostafrika, we have been given Fritz Karl Preichlatt and Heinz Schleicher, military engineers attached to our garrison, with tasked to create an independent electrical power line and power plant within Ostafrika to ensure we can exploit more modern technologies for our surveillance efforts. The cost has been extremely high. And of course the power lines could reach only the main settlements, but Reichskommissar Hootik has nonetheless appreciated the effort. And with the inauguration of the Preichlatt-Schleicher power plant in Quillamene, he has officially ended the project, declaring it a success. Alright, let's go ahead and thoroughly invest Mueller now. And then we can do some line investigation of Schenk as well. Well, Novosibirsk is kicking some ass. Who did Tomsk elect? What the fuck am I saying? Elect. The Decemberists. Interesting. We'll see how long that'll last. Well, in the meanwhile, let's buy some steel from Germania while we can. Our economy, it's not doing too bad. Let's put some right into GDP. And let's increase civilian spending as well. We'll see if that will allow us to construct anything. It fucking won't. That was pointless. We're spending money for no reason. But, yeah, gotta learn somehow, I suppose. Barely keeping hold of his excitement, Reichskommissar Hootik mounted the podium to join the guests of honor, Fritz Karl Preichlatt and Heinz Schleicher, two of the Reich's star engineers. It wasn't often he got the opportunity to work with men of their caliber, and he didn't intend to let the opportunity to use their genius go to waste. Arranging their assignment to him had taken years of lobbying, cajoling, and bribery, and today it would have finally come to fruition. The television cameras in the back of the vast concrete hall flashed to life as Hootik stepped in front of their turbine. After months of toil, the newly consecrated Eichstätt power plant would be brought online to send electricity flowing through Ostafrika's veins, bringing the savage land one step closer to civilization. Glancing over the gathered journalists and dignitaries, Hütig took a deep breath and began to speak. Germans, Freund, citizens of the Reich. Today we do more than simply flick a switch. Today we are bringing a spark from the sacred fire of Aryan civilization to Africa. With this the latest in German innovation, we do what the degenerates and the subhumans before them could not. We scourge barbarism from this land. We shine a light in the chaos of the darkest continent. This is more than just a power plant. It is a symbol of our unwavering commitment to bring the glory of National Socialism to Africa. So we continued for some time, extolling the virtues of Preikschlag and Schlicker. No mention was made of the dozens of slaves who had died in its construction, of the dried bloodstains that lurked behind the pristine concrete, the children who had lost their fathers. Finishing his speech, Hütig flickered the switch for the cameras, and for a second was paralyzed by fear. What if it didn't work? What if the cut corners made it fail, despite the test? He would be humiliated in front of the entire world. It would be the end of his career. Sweat beading on his forehead, his normally so disciplined mind swarming with irrational anxieties, Hütig felt his fear rise as the seconds dragged by. Mercifully, it was soon over. Like a beating heart, the turbines thrummed to life. Keeping a tight hold of his expression, Hütig allowed himself an imperceptible sigh of relief. It worked. It worked, and for now, that was all that mattered. Like a flash of lightning in the clouds, we live in the flicker. How's old Yankee Stan doing? NPPC, Indonesia's calling. We're actually getting some more support, which is actually pretty nice. Let's get Colonial reward programs. In order to bring our former enemies to our side, we shall begin a program of economic incentives to Anglo farmers and industrialists. Of course, only those who publicly display their support for the Reichskommissar shall receive the subsidies. There's also a second secret reward. Those who accept our rule and actively support us won't be persecuted and sent to the concentration camps. How nice. They could script more workers. Agents at Redacted returned from their operation to West Africa with less than satisfactory results. Agent Redacted was out conducting field surveillance in the hopes that evidence of collaboration or leniency between the rebel groups in West Africa and the authorities could be uncovered. Unfortunately, the territory they were in was far more patrolled than initially thought. Agent Redacted attempted to set up an observation position on more than one occasion, but nearby patrols forced them to change location. Eventually, the operative concluded the surveillance operation was impossible to accomplish and vacated the area with little to no actionable intelligence recovered. The operative insisted that the frequency and intensity of the patrols had made it hard to accomplish surveillance without being covered and possibly captured. Given the delicate circumstance of the situation, it's understandable that the enormous exposure and possible capture of one of our agents would cause enormous problems. The working theory that the rebel groups and the local authority have been collaborating is true. A massive breach like that would risk the exposure of the entire investigation and all our assets. We cannot discount the possibility that the rebels had advanced knowledge that they would be spied upon. An investigation of our intelligence network for any possible leaks is underway. Meanwhile, Agent Redacted will be temporarily kept away from the public, while they and their friends and relatives are investigated as well. For the glory of the fatherland, no matter how dark the night, the day always comes. Agents Redacted have returned from their operation in Leopoldville, and the results are promising. Agent Redacted infiltrated the central compound of the Central Afrikaner administration during the night to find proof on Reichskommissar Mueller, henceforth to refer to as the suspect, about his supposed ties to the Free French remnants. While inspecting the Bureau for Immigration, our agents made an interesting, if disturbing, find. Inside a cabinet filled with old documents were dozens of empty identity documents, absolutely identical to those used by the now-defunct French Republic and still in use among the exiles. They appear devoid of information, lacking both the photos and the personal data. The reason why such documents were inside the suspect's central compound eludes us, but not their potential application. By applying personal data on such ID, anyone could gain entrance to the Free French remnants, a hostile power, and since reports tell of a constant flow of political refugees escaping, like a French state, to join their brothers in exile, it's very likely that they would reach Central Africa, thanks to the fact that the French state is part of the Unity Pact. From there, they could receive new documents and leave for their final destination. Such practice would never be allowed to happen without an explicit order from above, which means that the suspect has taken a conduct violating Section 99 of a Strafgesetzbuch, working as an agent for intelligence service, punishable by up to 6 years in a concentration camp. We advise further investigation in order to discover how many Frenchmen managed to reach for remnants. For glory of the fatherland, snakes change their skin, but the fangs remain. Peculiar. So we barely have anything. Well, scheisse. We don't have much in the way of money, so we're going to have to secure some funding. Which, there we go. Let's see, it would seem that Magadan is winning in the east right now. Irkutsk has beaten Reddit Man. I would probably put money on Novosibirsk winning. Although I suppose I don't know for certain. And then here's always kind of a crapshoot. I guess Omsk's gonna win and fall apart. Anglos. Why are they such degenerates? Reichskommissar Hutik pondered the question as he lunched on his usual hearty but austere meal of rouladon and potato dumplings on the balcony of his palace. For once it was pleasantly cool, the sun seeming to have forego his usual bite for the day. A glass of cognac that had quickly become part of his everyday meal sat forgotten in his hand as he stared into the cloud of smog hovering over distant Quelimane. Though they were a mongrel race, the parts that made up the English jigsaw were sound. Centuries of Germanic immigration intermixing from Saxony, Jutland, Norway, combined with the Celtic blood of the early Britons. The Celts, of course, being Germanic due to their distant origins in the mountains of what would one day become Austria. And yet, despite their racial lineage, the old English regime had completely given themselves over to Judeo-Bolshevik degeneracy. He wondered why the folk of strong Germanic blood experienced such a total fall from grace. Taking a sip of cognac, Hutik cursed the fact that the English had gone to Africa before the Reich. Perhaps as a clean slate, without the taint of Judeo-Bolshevik degeneracy, he would have had an easier time teaching the subhumans to dance to the National Socialist tune. Even now, the Anglos infested their former colonies like maggots in a rotting corpse, and much to his contestation, his superiors would not allow him a free hand in dealing with them, though they sought to undermine the influence of the Reich at every turn. Scowling, Hutik recalled the letter he had received that morning from Germania. Apparently, as a token of good faith, those pseudo-degenerates who wanted him to approve the airing of an English-language radio program for the wealthy Anglo minority in Zambia and Zimbabwe. Well, if he had to, he had to. Still, Hutik promised himself he would not allow the Anglos to tank Ostafrican airways with their fraudulent propaganda. Finishing his cognac, he resolved that all English language media to be produced would need to have their scripts approved before airing, would be closely monitored by the Reich political agents. They could have a radio show as long as they did exactly as they were told. For good or evil, mine is a speech that cannot be silenced. Well, Here we go. Colonial information stations. In our efforts to subtly control our new Anglo subjects, we shall launch the East African Broadcasting Company, an English-spoken radio channel, to make them feel at home. Almost. Of course, all personnel have been previously vetted and are fully adherent to the principles of National Socialism. Their program will put the government under a bright light, and the location of the actual studios is a well-kept secret. Well, there we go. Yeah. Well, it looks like Cheetah went one there, actually, so I'd probably give them the advantage over Magadan. Oh, scheisse. Quilliamain mourned, as every other city in the Reich did, when they received news of Führer's passing. Flags flew at half-mast, men and women wept in the suites, marching bands paraded, playing a somber tune. The Reichskommissar himself gave a speech to party members in assembly. For one day in the Reich's African jewel, all its sons and daughters paid homage to the man who returned Germany to a place in the sun. Operative word. For one day. No more, no less. Quilliamain and Ostafrika will return to normal tomorrow morning, for the Aryan people are strong and need only weep once before marching once more into the future they are destined to inherit. Hans Hüttig will see to that full well. Grief, but in moderation, of course. That'll probably work out. So we've got Hitlerstadt over here. Only one infrastructure. I could have sworn there was a bit more, but I might just be wrong there. Well, this is certainly interesting. And I knew that frame drop. I could tell that frame drop from anything. The German Civil War ist hier. It is thus necessary that the individual should finally come to realize that his own ego is of no importance in comparison with the existence of a nation. Adolf Hitler. And so it begins. Well. So it begins. I see the unrest appearing in the Union. And surely something will be happening soon enough. Taking a sip of water to wet his throat before the broadcast went live, Ted Conway took a furtive glance at the man in the corner. He looked almost comical approached there in a high stool in his heavy uniform, glancing balefully across the room, his arms crossed and a permanent scowl plastered on his face. The craggy old devil reminded Conway of a ventriloquist's doll. He almost smiled at the realization before he remembered that this man has the power to have him killed in dozens of unspeakably horrible ways. Paling, he snapped his gaze back to the sound board and put his headphones on. As the recording of Bach's Brandenburg Concerto came to an end, the red Aktuell sign flickered back to life. Racing back down to the script, Conway took a deep breath again. Good morning, Reichskommissar Ostafrika. Welcome to East African Broadcast. I'm your host, Ted Conway. Joining me is my co-host, Douglas McSweeney. Thanks to the benevolence of Reichskommissar Hüttig, we have been granted a license to broadcast an English language radio show to bring you news, entertainment, and the reward of our Reichskommissar to you every weekday at 5 o'clock. Today we have a special news bulletin on the ongoing enormously successful electrification of rural Ostafrika, followed by a report on the unprecedented economic stability the policies of Hüttig have allowed us to enjoy. Doug took over, reciting the carefully prepared propaganda they'd been delivered half an hour before the show. By God, being a Nazi mouthpiece made Conway feel dirty. Still, it was a paycheck, even if there was the constant threat of mysteriously disappearing should he ever slip up. He looked surreptitiously at the sour old bastard in the corner, trying to gauge his reaction, but he looked just as bitter as usual. It made him uneasy. Conway sighed out of his nose, careful not to let the mic pick it up. Then, gathering his strength, he launched into an explosively buoyant phrase of the Reichskommissar's new mind expression. When the dream disappears, the life continues. Painfully. Well, I feel we should let it go on for a little longer. Well, we have the expansion to Africa. The Warsaw Uprising. Who was ruling in Ghana? No one I know. We do have despotists, Socidems, French. Couple options here, it seems. Now here's a good place to leave it off. To say things in Ostafrika are moving quickly would be an understatement. Officials in Quilomena working without sleep, racing between government buildings and military barracks. With the death of Hitler and the dawn of a fratricidal slaughter at home, lines of communication and supplies have become precarious at best. Every hallway smells of military cigarettes, and the countless office fiends are working even harder than any clerk or messenger. In the middle of it all, like the trunk among a million twisting roots, is Hans Hütig. He stands over his desk, looking at the sprawled memos, outdated frontier maps, and stained ledgers. Al, the Edentrius of an empire in crisis. Quickly, he opened up one of his filing cabinet and pulled out some folder. Written along the top in small block lettering is Notfallen Salzplan, Africa Shield. He looks over it and takes a breath. This is what must be done. He goes back to his desk and picks up the phone. Put me through to Windhoek in Leopoldville.